ألا من كنت مولاه فهذا علي مولاه. اللهم وال من والاه وعاد من عاداه.
Welcome dear viewers to another episode of Reborn live on Ahlul Bayt TV, the only channel broadcasting the pristine teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. Peace and blessings be upon them all, exclusively in the language of English. Alhamdulillah, it's my pleasure today to welcome Sister Amina Khan to the studio, who will inshallah share with us her amazing story as to how she came to Islam and the fold of Ahlul Bayt. Peace and blessings be upon them. A truly amazing story which I'm sure you'll all find out in due course, inshallah. So make sure you keep watching. As always, I would like to welcome you to the studio on behalf of all of our viewers. Sister Amina, thank you very much for coming in. I know that you don't actually live here in London. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yes. Okay, so let's start. As always, alhamdulillah, I know that sometimes you've had an opportunity to watch some of the shows, so you've had an idea of normally what we do, and we like to start from pretty much the genesis of your life, from where you know, the very earliest years, formative years of your life, inshallah. So presumably you were born here in the UK.
I was born in the UK, but for the first 4 or 5 years of my life, my family and I lived in the Isle of Man. My father was Manxman, and they were a Christian family. They were C of E by choice.
Church of England?
Yes. So the church and religion in that respect played an important role in our lives.
Sure. So you said your father was a?
Manxman. That means he came from the Isle of Man.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Apologies. Sorry, I thought it was some religious title. Okay. So you were Church of England, and you remember, I guess, in these early years, going to church and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, what did it entail? Was it just simply going to church on a Sunday, or?
Well, for most of us, it was going to church on a Sunday. For my father, he was very religious, actually. He would go twice on a Sunday, and he'd sort of make time during his working day as well to read the Bible. And then later on, he became more involved in the church, and also we as children were encouraged to become more involved. My older brothers, one of them was an altar boy, then he was a choir boy, and later on I became a member of the choir as well.
Okay, interesting. And you mentioned that you were in the Isle of Man up until the age of about 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Do you actually know why you decided as a family to move away?
It was for medical reasons on my part, because we could get better treatment and specialist help here in the UK rather than being on a small island.
Sure.
Because I have problems with my heart. So it was felt that it was a good idea anyway. My father was working on the UK mainland as a lorry driver. So for him it was easier as well, rather than going back and forth on a ferry.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how many brothers, you mentioned your older brothers, how many of you were there in total?
Well, there were 3 older brothers. An older brother, I mean, the oldest was 18 years older than me.
Wow.
There would have been an older sister, although she died of leukemia when she was very young. And then I have a younger sister by 2 years. So in total we were 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've mentioned a lot about your father. What about your mother? I mean, was she quite religious as well, or less so?
She was sort of not into organised religion, but she sort of, for the sake of family and being cohesive, and also it's better when you have children that both parents are of a similar mindset rather than one varying. Her sort of religion was more like more instinctive, more to do with nature rather than to do with a church and laws and dogma.
Sure. Yeah. So was it a case, as just thinking about some members of my family, for example, where they'd say, you know, they believe in God, they believe in the, you know, a supreme being, they believe in the concept of a God, but they wouldn't necessarily affiliate themselves to any particular
Yes,
religion.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously, it seemed to work quite fine, i.e. the fact that your dad was quite religious and your mother didn't necessarily oppose his religiosity.
No, that's right.
Okay. And when you were in these younger years of your life, you mentioned how you got involved in the church. Can you just give us a bit more detail? I mean, what did this entail? And for example, did you go to Saturday or Sunday school or anything like this?
Okay, the main thing was Sunday. We went to the Sunday Eucharist, as they call it. That's a Sunday service. But the children, me, my sister, we went to Sunday school during the service and came out when it was the time for communion, which was the sort of pinnacle of the service. Also, we were enrolled in church schools as well.
Okay.
And it was only much later on that I became a member of the choir, and a little later on that I was confirmed in the Church of England as well.
Okay. And was it the case, I mean, you mentioned you had a brother who was 18 years your senior. Sometimes, especially in the West and in a lot of Christian families, the parents or one parent may be quite religious, but that doesn't necessarily always translate down to the children. For those, for example, your older siblings, and even as you were becoming an adult yourself, I mean, was it the case that you as a family were quite religious, or was it a case that you all kind of went your separate ways in terms of their relationship with God?
Actually, with my brothers, when they moved out of the household, one of my brothers, younger to my eldest brother, he sort of maintained his religion. My eldest brother, he liked going to the Baptist church.
Okay.
For him, that was his slot. My other brother had and the third brother wasn't at all religious and has never been religious, really. But with our setup with my sister and me and my mum and dad, it was my father actually that left the Church of England when I was about 10, I suppose, because he couldn't get on with the sort of, what he saw as the hypocrisy, that he was this working class man and he was going to this church and the vicars were sort of in comfortable positions and not having to struggle, and yet they couldn't see that their own parishioners were in struggles sort of financially, or and he didn't like the way that the vicars themselves would sort of answer his questions with sort of they're there now, and there was no real, I suppose their Christianity was Sunday service and sort of platitudes rather than real concrete help.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So, I mean, I guess what you're saying is a priest is not just a priest, he's almost like a social worker to the community, and maybe that particular facet was missing.
He felt that way, and he felt that he was being, he felt that some of the clergy at that time were sort of not looking down upon the parishioners, but sort of treating them like children.
Sure.
And also my father, he got to a point where he was like, well, you know, I'll find my own way. And so that's what he decided himself.
Fair enough. How did that impact on you? I mean, because he was obviously a great influence in your lives in terms of your participation in the church. When he decided to move away, to back off, if you like, I mean, how did that impact on you and your siblings?
Well, me and my sister, we still remain going to church for about 2 years. And my mother did come and join us as well, but then she stopped going. But when I was 12, that's when I started to question the whole of the business of Christianity itself.
Okay. So you and your sister continued to go to the church. Just going back to your dad for a second, what did he then do? I mean, he decided to find his own way. Did he find his own way into another church, another kind of sect, Christian sect, or was it just a case that religion became something personal to him?
No, the religion did become something personal to him. He sort of became more akin to my mother's way of thinking, although she hadn't done anything to sway him that way. It was just more, you know, I can do it on my own. Why do I have to go on a Sunday and worship a God on a Sunday, you know, when I can do it on my own and around myself. He at that point in his life, he was a gardener, and he liked being with nature, and he kept some livestock as well.
Okay.
So that's how he sort of found God and things through creation and nature, rather than going to a drafty building.
Sure.
And just sort of singing a few hymns on a Sunday morning.
Sure.
Yeah.
Drafty building, yes, that brings back a lot of memories. It was always very cold. You used to keep your coat on. So you were saying that at the age of 12, you yourself began to question the whole setup, if you like. And what conclusions did you draw?
I think it was before I was 12. Like, when I was being prepared for confirmation by the clergy, I kept asking questions like, look, if this is one universal Catholic church, why is the Church of England only present in England, in Scotland, but in Africa, but nowhere else? Why are there so many different sects of Christianity, with Catholics believing, you know, in one thing, but yet you split from them, and then you have Methodists? And then I asked sort of quite serious questions on dogma and some of the sort of something to do with the Nicene Creed, which was formulated in 325. For instance, like, who decided that Jesus was man? And later on I found out it was the Council of Nicaea that had voted that Jesus was just man and also God. And
Sure.
so it was quite deep questions, and I get, you shouldn't be asking these questions. They're a matter of faith, and also, you know, if you keep asking these questions, you won't be confirmed by the bishop. And so it was sort of debated among them whether I should be confirmed.
Really?
Yeah, and then also with my checkups I had to have in London. And there was one time when there was a Muslim woman, probably from the Arabian Peninsula, and she was in full niqab. And you could only see her eyes, and my father was sort of, you see this woman, you'll be like her in about 10 years, in 20 years' time. And so I was like, okay, fine. He was always saying daft things like this. Then a few months after, one of my older brothers had joined the army, and he came back from Turkey, and my sister got jewellery, and I got prayer mats.
You got
prayer mats.
Really?
And he was like, oh yeah, Dad said you'll need these, but so you might as well have them. And I was like,
wow.
Anyway, so when I was 12, I left the Church of England. I didn't stop believing in God, but I did stop believing in... I suppose I lost my faith in the Church of England rather than losing my faith in God.
In God. So you decided that the Church of England wasn't for you. It's quite a common story, this, you know, if you become what would be considered a difficult parishioner, i.e. asking difficult questions, and this concept of it's a matter of faith, not so much intellect. Were you having these discussions with anybody that was your age? The only reason why I'm asking is because I'm thinking people your age would probably think, what on earth are you talking about, you know? Why aren't you talking about, I don't know, whatever it was in those days, pop idol, whatever it was in those days, as opposed to...
E17 and who's your favourite pin-up? This was what was at school.
Yeah, so I'm assuming you didn't have these conversations with your fellow colleagues.
I suppose it was my medical condition that prevented me from sort of being involved in PE, for instance, and building up team. And also I was so into my books and reading and learning, because from a young age I thought, if I can't do anything physical, then I can do something with my brain, which I did do. And so I wasn't into these sort of conversations that didn't go anywhere, didn't mean anything and that. So I like sort of thinking over things myself and coming, you know, reading and getting background information and coming to a conclusion myself.
Sure, sure. So tell me what your father meant. I mean, it seems as though he meant you were going to become a Muslim at some point in the future, but I mean, why would he look at his 12-year-old daughter, somebody who's just moved away from the church, probably doesn't have any sympathy for any other religion, and probably not Islam, especially, you know, if he had bought into the kind of image that, you know, one sees in the media on a day-to-day basis. Why would he say something like that? How was he able to, you know, obviously he knew his daughter well enough, but, you know, how was he able to come to that conclusion?
I don't know, he had these sort of premonitions or intuitions, whatever you want to call it, of many other things as well. So, and he'd say these things sort of out loud to you, or whoever it concerned. But you really wouldn't take him so seriously, or you'd think, okay, fine, yeah, whatever. So, that was it really, it wasn't...
Sure.
And at the time as well, I mean, Islam and being Muslim wasn't in the media, say, in the 1990s as it became, you know, after 9/11 and, you know, subsequently as the dawah and the spread of Islam. You know, it was quite... Islam was sort of a religion where, as far as the people who I live with were concerned, it's like, oh, it's to do with the Pakistanis, you know, in such a part of Accrington, such a part of Blackburn. So
it was seen as an ethnic religion for a particular ethnic group?
Yeah, well, the main sort of people that were Muslims were either from India or from Pakistan.
Sure.
In our area, suppose if we'd have come across Arabs or that, we'd just say, oh, it's from Arabs. But there were no Arabs in Lancashire.
So tell me, what happened then when you decided that the Church of England wasn't quite for you? Did you actually have your confirmation?
I had my confirmation when I was 10.
Oh, okay.
Actually, my dad had the premonition when I was 9. So, but when I was 12, I made up my own mind. Sort of, there's no point in me going to church when I don't believe what they're saying. And then I come to the conclusion, I'll either come back or I won't come back, or I'll find something different. But I wasn't, for about a year after, I wasn't actively seeking out anything else.
So, so what did you do? I mean, because presumably there was this vacuum. You know, you'd spent the best part of your life up until that point being involved with the church. You know, your dad a few years ago has pulled away, and now you are doing the same thing. Presumably, I'm guessing maybe your sister followed suit as well.
Oh, she'd done it actually before me, so it was just me at one point going on my own to church.
Sure. So presumably there must have been this vacuum. I mean, as you said, you know, the church played a very important role in your life, and so, I mean, how did you fill that gap? Did you then just, you know, do what other teenagers did and, you know, stuck the posters up on the wall, or was it just a case of reading on your own? I mean, how did you...
No, I sort of got stuck into my music and studying music mainly. I used to play the piano.
Okay.
And also just getting stuck into reading, and I was studying, I was at school, so...
Sure. So you had enough.
Yeah, and so I wasn't sort of seeking anything else. But then gradually I needed to fill something. So I thought, okay, I'll go to the local Catholic church and see what that's like.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how old were you when this was, when you started going there?
This was when I was about 14.
Okay, so after a couple of years of, you know, so you decided to go to the Catholic church.
Yeah.
And the result was?
Well, then I was received into the Catholic church when I was 15.
When you say received?
Well, they say received, it's like being reconfirmed again.
Right.
Into the Catholic church.
Right.
So, and I studied the dogma and doctrines and things, and at that time it was sort of, there seemed to be more, although there were more rules, it seemed more structured, I suppose, and I think that was what I was after at that point.
Sure, sure. And all of the questions that you were that you had previously, were they still there? Were these questions that you posed to the Catholic bishops as well, or not really? Was it just the fact that you had this structural, or there's more structured religion, that, you know, that the questions kind of took a back seat?
The questions did take a back seat for several years. The thing was, it wasn't just the structure. I did feel sort of I was doing the right thing in the eyes of God to become a Catholic. And the thing for me was that if I was doing something that I felt I was sort of being called to do, then that's what I should do, regardless of whether people were happy about it or not happy about it.
And were people, well, what was people's reaction?
Well, my sort of friends of my peer group weren't happy about it. You know, the friends I had were leading different lives, I suppose. And they were saying things, oh, you know, if you get pregnant and you can't have an abortion, or, you know, if you're with your boyfriend you can't use contraception, and things like this. And I was like, well, why would you need to be using it? You shouldn't even be doing these things.
Sure.
So it was quite, and it was sort of, well, why do you want to be a Catholic then? And I sort of, well, this is the right thing for me to do. And, so they couldn't understand that concept.
Sure. What about your family?
My mother was sort of, she didn't like it, but she settled with it. You know, it was like, oh, if you want to do it, then fine, do it. But I'm not interested. And my dad wasn't bothered.
And your mum's displeasure, was it because it was Christianity again, or because it was organised religion? Whereas, you know, she had this more kind of, don't know what the right term is, but her way of looking at things was, you know, it's more internal, if you like.
No, her family background was like, family were, I mean, her father and grandfathers and that, they were from the Orange Lodge tradition. And if you have any history of Northern Ireland and Scotland, there was a big enmity between the Orange Lodge and Catholics.
Right, of course.
So that was her background.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but of course, your mother wasn't going to stand in your way.
No.
Okay.
So.
And again, was this something you did on your own? I'm assuming now your younger sister probably found her own way in life, if you like.
Yeah, she did. She totally went off religion, completely, to the point of atheism. Whereas I sort of, no, there's still something there. And yeah.
Okay. So what were your experiences? I mean, did this? Did you feel at peace with yourself once you became a Catholic, and did you get yourself integrated within the activities of the church and further afield?
Concerning being integrated with the church, yes, and very quickly. I knew the priest quite well, and I ended up helping him out a few weeks later, and then ongoing for the next few years with parish duties, along with my college work and my school work before. So we do things like setting up the church and everything on Saturdays, ready for Sunday, for Easter services and Christmas. We do, you know, that was a week-long job that you were setting up for. Also seeing parishioners, so I was doing parish work as well. And on Sundays as well I was working. So I'd work weekends for the priest and in the parish as well.
Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. And so what happened? I mean, how long did you stay with the church for? Was this something that, and did you find yourself pull away as you got older, or was it a case that you got even more involved?
Well, you'd said in your last question about did you have a feeling of peace and things. I can say honestly that the feelings of peace sort of they were there for 2 weeks, and then I started thinking about the religious life. And this was when I was 15. And then I thought, right, my mother said that becoming a Catholic was a phase, but now me thinking about becoming a nun, now this definitely is a phase. So I was a bit in turmoil with it. And I thought, if I tell anybody what I'm thinking, then they're going to think I'm completely mad. So if it's just a phase, it'll go away, it'll be fine. So I'll just get on with my, day-to-day things, my school, my, working in the parish, and it should go away. So it didn't go away, actually. There's an advert in one of the Catholic newspapers about trying the religious vocation. But I was too young at that time. You had to be over 16 to apply for it. But I did write to the abbess. She was a Benedictine abbess. They're enclosed usually, meaning that they don't go out to work.
Right.
And she gave me, and I told her everything, and she gave me a lot of, good words of encouragement and support. And then, actually, it was a few months later, and I went on pilgrimage to one of the English shrines. This is situated in Norfolk.
Okay.
And I remember the people with me from the parish, and they were saying, oh, did you ever think about religious life when you were growing up, when you were a teenager? And no, I never thought of anything like that. Did you ever think about becoming a priest? No, I didn't think of becoming about that either. No, I always thought I was going to get married, and this was how the conversation was. And then they turned to me and said, we've got hope in Elaine, that was my original name, Elaine, and they said, we've got hope in Elaine, haven't we? She could be a nun. And I thought they'd read my face or read my mind or something, and I went, just crimson. So, and then a few months after that, I told the priest sort of guessed that I was thinking about that. So he got me 2 addresses, and it was from there that I took it.
Thinking about becoming a nun. How old were you at this point?
I just turned 16.
Right.
Yeah.
So literally a year or so into joining, after joining the church.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned how the priest helped you get some numbers, and presumably you applied at that stage or later on?
The thing was, he gave me 2 addresses to get in contact with. One was an active order that specialised in nursing the elderly and the sick, and also running a guest house, hospitality. And the other address was of a contemplative order. One that meant that they wouldn't go outside for, say for instance, to do teaching or social work or nursing, and their life was a life of prayer only.
Prayer only, okay.
So the one I got in contact with first was the active order, because I thought, okay, you get the best of both worlds. So the first thing I did was write a letter asking if I could come on a retreat, and so I did do that later on in the summer. But it was 1 week retreat and then 1 week to work in the guest house. So I'd get a taste. I didn't actually write to the contemplative order because, I don't know, I thought, okay, that one will be enough, and I'm not sure about contemplative order.
Sure.
But it was the priest who had said, I went to that contemplative order the other day and they said you haven't written to them. I was like, okay, fine, I'll write to them. So, and I asked if it would be possible to stay with them for 3 days in their guest house. So, and that was arranged.
Okay.
And that would be over the summer as well.
Okay, so presumably that summer you did both?
Yeah.
Okay, and what was the conclusion you came to after experiencing both?
Okay, the active order, I came to the conclusion that if you can juggle both lives of religious service to God and doing nursing, that's good, but I thought I couldn't do that because it would be like splitting myself into 2.
Really?
Yeah. And the contemplative order, now that was different. And I felt it was more inviting and more warm, even though at that point I'd meet the sisters behind what was called a grill in the parlour, which was like meeting them behind a gate.
Why was that?
Well, it's to do with the rule of enclosure and how it's interpreted.
Okay.
So we'd be in a room, but it would be partitioned by a small wall and these gates, and part of the gate would open. And on my side it would be carpeted and comfy chairs, warm, nice, curtains. And then on their side it was bare wooden boards, white wall, crucifix, a hard chair, and that was that. But actually that appealed more to me. And also that the time I spent with them, I was also allowed in the garden. And the gardens were huge, and they were nice, and so that's how I got to see sort of a bit more. And I met different sisters each day while I was there.
The 3 days you were there. So you then decided that you were going to join the contemplative order.
And no, I thought my calling was sort of heading towards being contemplative, to be enclosed. But it wasn't for another few years before I could actually join them.
Because?
Because of my age. I was 16, you have to be over 18.
Right.
And also I looked into different contemplative orders during that time. And also another monastic house, which was of the same order as the same ones I'd stayed with.
So you joined one of the orders at the age of 18?
No, I was at college doing my A-levels.
Okay.
And then I'd finished college and I went to on like a pilgrimage to Assisi and Rome. And I'd sort of been not put off the idea of being a religious, being a nun, but I didn't think it was right for me. When I sort of began the pilgrimage, but when I came back, I thought, and I had the choice of going back to college. So I went back to college on the Monday morning, and halfway through the morning I just sort of decided, right, I'm going to ask to enter. So I walked out of college, wrote a letter, and I said, there are a few things I said in it, and I said the last thing, and another thing is I'd like to ask formally for permission to enter the religious order. So I sent the letter, and I was going in a few weeks because they were having a profession of one of the sisters, which meant she'd finished all her training, a novitiate, and she was being professed as a nun properly. So she'd swap a white veil for a black veil, and she was in there then for life.
Really?
Yeah, so that was when we decided, okay, come and see us properly then. During that time frame, from when I was 16 to when I was 19, I'd sort of had I'd been in for a month at a time with the sisters, and sort of been on open days, and been with them for like some weeks during my half term and that. So I got to know them, and they got to know me quite well.
Okay. So how long were you in this particular order for once you decided to join at the age of about 19?
Yeah, I was in the order itself for about 4 years.
Really?
Yeah.
And how long does it take for you to swap, or for one to swap a white veil for a black veil? In other words, did you manage to get through the whole process of, if you like, the graduation process, or was this something that would have taken a lot longer than 4 years?
It would have taken a minimum of 4.5 years. So
Really?
I was near the time.
So you were quite close to the end of your tenure.
Yeah.
And then you decided that, did you decide to leave yourself?
Yes, I did.
Why?
Well, during my monastic life, my life as a nun, it wasn't just sort of a life of prayer. You know, you get up in the morning, you pray all day, all afternoon, all evening, go to bed, and that's it. We had other jobs to do. And one of the jobs I was printing, I had novitiate for my training, but the other thing that I was encouraged...
novitiate, sorry, if you could just...
Novitiate was like training. So one of the sisters would be your novice mistress, and she would sort of teach you the rules of the order, and about the order's saints. Our order's saints were Carmelites, so there was Saint Teresa of Avila and things like that. But that was the novitiate training. But I was also encouraged to do studying.
Okay.
So things like early scripture, Jewish and Christian scriptures.
Okay.
A lot of Bible study, early church history. And it was doing this studying and also learning Arabic from one of the other sisters.
Learning Arabic?
Yeah, she'd been to, she'd had 3 years in Cairo, Carmel.
So this is presumably a Catholic order in Egypt?
Yeah,
okay.
It was, it's now in Al-Fayoum, they moved. But at the time they were in Cairo, a Catholic order in Cairo. And they were quite an international community. And one of the sisters at the monastery that I was in, she had gone to Cairo to help out. And she'd learnt Arabic from one of the Lebanese sisters and from the Egyptian gardeners, you know. So then I found out about this. And I've always been into language learning, and so I was like, teach me some. And she was like, okay, fine. So she taught me some, and then we went together to sort of like learn more about Arabic. And
you went together, what,
well,
outside of...
No, we sort of, that's a bit wrong. We sort of encouraged each other to sort of continue learning Arabic. So it meant sort of getting books from the library, or there was one where we got a New Testament, a children's New Testament in Arabic.
Okay.
So we'd sort of painstakingly try and learn the Arabic and read the Arabic. Yeah.
Was there a copy of the Quran in English or Arabic in the library?
That was one of the things that sort of guided me to Islam. With the studying, my questions came back, but this time I could sort of base my questions on certain facts that I'd found and certain holes that I'd found within Christian and Jewish traditions. And also learning Arabic. There was one, when I was first learning Arabic, I'd learn a phrase a day. So one thing was, like, tomorrow there will be apricots, bukra fi mishmish. Then we'd sort of try and sort of get the grammar from it. Then another phrase that my course sister told me was, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. So it was interesting, the grammar, and I knew what it meant. And I was just sort of telling the novice mistress, who also happened to be the prioress, you know, oh, this is what, and she just asked, what did you learn for Arabic today? And I said, oh, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And she went, what does that mean? And I said, there is only one God and Muhammad is his prophet. And she said, and she hit the roof.
Really? I can imagine.
And she's like, what are you being taught these things for? You should be, you know, learning about your religion, your church, your history, about the Carmelite order. And I said, we just did it for the grammar. And I sort of like, I don't care, you're not doing Arabic again. I said, okay, that's up to you, mother, but I'll do Arabic secretly if you do that.
Are you actually allowed to say something like that?
Well, you sort of, the sister that was older than me in religion, who had just been professed, she was sort of all very, you know, sort of great respect, and she wouldn't question the authority. But we were allowed to, in certain circumstances, to question the authority. And I said, it's just a language I'm learning. I'm learning it for the grammar. And if she hadn't have reacted that way, I wouldn't have questioned anything anymore.
Sure.
But the way she questioned it, I sort of thought, well, don't Christians believe that there is only one God? And they do, to their extent, and to the field that they're thinking. And then I thought, okay, what about this Muhammad guy? I mean, he's supposed to be a prophet, but then the prophet should have ended just before Jesus. So I have to find out about him. Because my medical checkups were still in London at the time, I had to go down and stay with one of the other monastery's houses that used to be in Golders Green. And so I thought, okay, if I get out early from my hospital appointment, I could go to the Edgware Road and I could go and see if there are any Arabic things I could pick up for me and Sister Josephine. Okay, and I'll see if they've got like a Quran in English or something. So after I'd finished, I went down to the Edgware Road. I should have gone straight back to the monastery, by the way. And I picked up a few newspapers and things, and then I was in one shop and the man said, "Oh, you read in Arabic?" And I said, "Yeah." So he spoke to me in Arabic and I spoke back, and he said, "Oh, that's great, have them." I said, "Oh, thanks, but you don't happen to have like a Quran in English or something?" He said, yeah, take it. And he gave me a Quran in English, and it was so small I could fit it under my habit and sort of sneak it into the monastery. So, but they didn't have any in our monastery library. They had 2 books on Islam. One was a very childlike book saying, "Know your Muslim neighbour," and the other one was, I think, on Sufism. Nothing about.
So what happened
Islam
with this smuggled Quran?
It got hidden in my cell, which was my bedroom. The nuns refer to their bedrooms as cells.
Really?
Yeah, it's supposed to go back to because our order was like from the Middle East. The ancient rule, we had little sort of hermitages on Mount Carmel, and the little hermitages were called cells.
Right.
So that's where it came from.
Okay. So when you opened up this book and started to read, what happened next?
It was sort of, I'd start reading it, and then things sort of, okay, so it says that in Christianity. I'd start thinking, that says that in Christianity. This says that in Judaism, but it's saying this in Islam. Actually, this is making more sense. And as the further I read on, sort of things sort of stood out, and the science of it stood out. The thing, it's been pointed out in other books, like things like clouds, mountain formations, embryology, things like that. And it's sort of, okay, this is something.
Did you discuss this with anybody, or was this something that you...
Oh no, I didn't, definitely not discuss it with
anybody. Not even to your colleague who you were studying Arabic with?
No, because she saw, and she still is, she's very sort of Christian in her outlook and in her life. So it was okay for me to be having some sort of questions or doubts in my faith, but I wouldn't want to inflict it upon somebody else.
Sure.
Because I always felt that could knock somebody's faith in God.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So this comparative study, if you like, was taking place, i.e. you were coming across, you had some idea of Judaism, of course you were quite fluent in Christian theology, and now you were coming across Islamic theology and seeing that no doubt many commonalities, however some differences, and for the most part a lot of the differences made more sense than what you maybe adhered to before. Yeah. So then what happened?
It was coming across the verse in Surah Ma'idah, that there are priests and monks amongst you, and they recognise the truth. I think it's Surah Ma'idah 85 or 87, I'm not sure. And it was that verse that actually sort of, okay, then I put down the Quran, and I didn't go back to it actually after that. I was thinking, and then at that point, I was doing canon law, so it meant that I was representing other sort of people, especially religious sisters, if they wanted to leave or if they wanted to change house, for instance. There were certain things to go through and procedures. And I was also looking into early Christianity, a degree level study.
Okay.
Everything that we studied, it was to quite a high level, but we could never get recognition from it because nuns are supposed to be humble and self-effacing.
Right. Yeah, sorry. We've just got 5 minutes left, and unfortunately, we haven't covered all of the stuff that we want to. But just tell me very quickly. Of course, unfortunately, I'm having to rush you a bit here. First, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? In other words, what caused you to leave the order? And then, second, how did you go about finding out more about Islam and becoming a Muslim?
Yeah. At the time, my health had deteriorated quite significantly. And also, for myself, I wasn't able to participate fully in the day-to-day activities of the religious life. So I used that as an excuse to leave the order. There wasn't any one thing, but it was more to do with me deciding, right, I've got to go and find out about Islam and then I can become a Muslim.
Really?
Yeah.
You'd made that decision?
Yeah. So in my heart, Christianity, that had stopped. So I'd left the order, and it was over a period of 18 months that I found out about things. It was such a lengthy thing because my father died during that time, and I also had to sort out the financial arrangements for my mother and the rest of the family, make sure everything was okay, and then I could go ahead and set up. And then I'd started a college course, and I met a few Muslims on that college course. And I asked one of the girls sort of about Islam, and she and her brothers were into Sufism as their spirituality. So that's how I sort of found parts of Islam. And then I'd become very ill. I was in hospital, and so ill that it was whether I'd live or die or whatever. But then once I'd sort of made my mind up, when I'd been discharged, I phoned my friend. I said, now I want to make Shahada. Forget sort of teaching me any more about Islam. So she and her brothers had picked me up, and we went to her house, and all our friends, mutual friends, were there, and so then I made Shahada.
Alhamdulillah. And this was how long ago?
This was nearly 7 years ago now.
7 years ago, yeah. Alhamdulillah. And how did you, because as you mentioned they were of Sufi persuasion, how did you find the Ahlul Bayt?
I've only sort of found that recently, within the last 18 months or so. I knew of Shiism, Sunnis, and other minor sects. I wasn't interested in placing myself in one camp or the other camp. So maybe for the first 5 years, I did a lot of studying with tafsir and Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. But the funny thing was, and I had a lot of Sunni friends, and they really sort of, there were certain personalities in Sunni Islam that are quite prominent, but I was not attracted to. Whereas there are other figures that I were attracted to, but that lent more towards Shia Islam.
Well, what was the attraction in the first place?
Because they were, what, towards Shia Islam?
No, sorry, the personalities that you, is this from what, from historical readings or?
Yeah, it was later on that historical readings that I'd sort of become more okay, and also using logic and reading more widely and more academic papers.
Sure. And the reaction of your Sunni friends was?
It's sort of a hot potato, isn't it, if you say you're Shia. or you lean more towards Shiism, is that, oh, what are you doing being Shia? You know, they curse this person, they curse that person, they do this, they do that. They're this sort of people, they're that sort of people. And I'm like, I've never heard anybody cursing anybody else in any aspect. And the things you refer to are actually, you know, like for instance, they're so, you shouldn't have bid'ah, no bid'ah at all, but yet a lot of their historical figures have sort of based parts of Islam on bid'ah, on innovations and things. And it was reading a very good book by a non-Muslim, Wilfrid Mandelberg.
Yes. Succession to the
Succession
Prophet.
to the
Yes,
Prophet.
beautiful book, yeah.
Yeah, and that was, it wasn't on one side or the other, but the only conclusion I could come to then was okay, Sunni Islam is Sunni Islam, but Shia Islam is mine, so I'm a Muslim and a mu'minah.
Inshallah, alhamdulillah, congratulations. And just finally, once you made that decision from all of the reading and all of the studies that you went through, and of course the book you mentioned is quite an academic, well, he's a professor in his own right, and his approach was very academic when he wrote that book. But once you made that decision, I mean, how did you go about it? Because if you like, circle of influence, your circle of friends were predominantly Sunni, and by the sounds of it, some of them were anti-Shi'i. You know, how did you then go and take the step? Was it something you did alone? Did you go out and find a community?
Going back to once I'd reverted and I moved out of the family home, I didn't know how to pray. I wasn't taught that. And it was a good friend of mine who taught me how to pray. But he prayed as a Shia Muslim. But I didn't know the difference between Sunni or Shia, you know, ways of prayer. So, and I've always prayed as a Shia. So, and that only sort of came to me about 3 years ago. I thought, okay, fine, it's just prayer. And I was doing it that way. And now, with the help of my friend as well, I've been able to sort of widen my circle of Shia friends by going. This year I was really happy to be involved in the Majlis near to where I lived in Bolton, and also you know, have more Shia connections. So between Bolton and Liverpool, I've got some more Shia friends and contacts. Although I'm still in contact with my Sunni friends, because I'm not going to sort of stop contact like that with them or at any time, because first of all, they did do a lot for me during my formative years, but also they're good friends now. And they're Muslims too.
Of course.
So there's no need for any breakup or breaking. But if anybody sort of says, you know, you're doing this and you shouldn't be doing that, and if I know correctly, I'll tell them, no, this is the way because, and ABC.
Brilliant. Sister Amina Khan, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much for sharing your story, from becoming almost at the cusp of becoming a nun to becoming a Muslim and a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. I'm sure you all will share me in thanking Sister Amina for that. Thank you very much for joining us. And please remember, if you know of anybody who would be interested in sharing their story of how they came to Islam, then please email us at reborn@ahlulbayt.tv. Once again, thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.